Okay, great.
I'm gonna hit this button in 1 minute. And I will pop out and you guys can do an intro and start up. Is that all right?
Yep. Thank
Good
you.
luck, everyone. Thank you again. I'm excited.
Thank you. Same here. Is Checkly loading?
I think it's my internet provider. They're having issues with GitHub as well.
Oh.
I'll try Tether maybe. Fun times for my phone line to have troubles with DNS.
Yeah. I mean, we are going to.
All right, I'm gonna hit this button.
Okay.
And we shall start. Let anybody in that's there. Don't know how many people we'll have on, but we shall see.
Hi, everyone. I can't see the chat though. Can Maria, do you see the chat?
Yes, I do.
Okay, great. Then you would be the one looking at if there are any questions in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
For now, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it looks good in terms of chat. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, so we started it as a classical Zoom meeting, but maybe we can go to the webinar format slowly. So I'm Sarah from Checkly, and we are here today to talk about streamlining, monitoring, and observability. We're using the example of Render, who is one of our clients and is one of the early adopters of our newest feature, Checkly Traces. Checkly Traces is going GA today, and at the end of the webinar, we will give you some links to try it out. And we are very excited to hear about to hear what you think about it. But before we get started, I did not actually say anything about myself. So I am a product marketing manager at Checkly. I've been here for about a year and a half. Obviously, I have been working on this launch and very excited. And I have Maria and Brian here with me, and I will let them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Brian, and as mentioned, I work for Render, which is a cloud hosting platform based out of San Francisco. And the basic idea is that we handle the underlying infrastructure for you so that you don't have to. I work on the infrastructure team here and spend most of my time looking into our networking. And so Checkly is a tool that we use heavily.
Thank you. Well, hi everyone. I'm Maria. I'm a product manager here at Checkly, and I have been the one driving our observability journey in OpenTelemetry. So super excited to be celebrating the GA launch with Render and Brian today.
Thank you. So just a few things before we get started. If you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A section, and we are recording this session. And just to quickly go through what we'll be covering today, a short intro to Checkly, what we do, and then same thing for Render. And also we'll go through some of the challenges they faced with observability and why they came to us in the first place, and then how we helped them primarily improve their time to resolution with our with Checkly Traces, and then also some other remarkable results, I would like to say. Before we get started, let's also get to know each other. We would love to know if you're a Checkly user, and if not, are you using any other synthetic monitoring tool? And then, as our Checkly Traces feature is based on OpenTelemetry, we would love to know if you are familiar with it, if you are already doing observability with OTel, and which tool you're using. Okay. I will move on to the intro to Checkly. So we ensure application performance and reliability, basically. There are four main pillars to our platform. The first one is testing. As Checkly is based on Playwright, we allow you to implement end-to-end tests in your CI/CD. And then the monitoring part is that you can use synthetic monitoring to monitor your UI and API in production with the same tests used in CI/CD, meaning you can define your monitors as code next to your application code. Third one is observability, what we'll be talking about today, which comes down to our traces feature, meaning that we give you the exact trace about your failed check, pinpointing exactly what went wrong. And then incident management means that we have a lot of alerting options that allow you to communicate failures among your internal teams and also with your customers. And now we want to introduce Render. So I do have some notes on Render. We kind of already mentioned what Render does. Brian, do you want to add something?
No, I mean, I think probably the most important thing for today is talking about how our infrastructure handles critical tasks. One of those tasks is our routing layer, which is basically responsible for taking requests from the internet and forwarding it onto user services. And that's kind of what we use Checkly to monitor the most. Well, not exclusively, but that's like our most heavy usage, and that's where we use traces the most, and we'll get into that more later.
Thank you. So yes, we can get started with the challenges that you were facing when you started looking for a monitoring solution. So I do have some notes around engineers spending too much time maintaining and setting up monitors, which kind of leads to delayed issue resolution. And then using a lot of tools to monitor different parts of the app, and the need for a monitoring solution that can scale, provide automatic monitoring creation. But maybe you could tell us about what was the most important thing and what was the biggest challenge you had that made you look for a monitoring solution?
Yeah, I think the way we ended up on Checkly in the first place was kind of the earlier part of what you were mentioning, which was a classic case for us is there'll be a support ticket that says something like, 1 in every 1,000 requests, I find that I have a slow request or I have a failure of some sort. And prior to Checkly, basically to investigate something like that was like a multi-day long investigation that involved jumping around between multiple different tools and sort of like oftentimes making code changes to our routing layer so that you could add metrics or log lines and things like that. And now with Checkly, and in particular with traces, we have set up a system where we have sort of a known good baseline reference services that we're constantly pinging and tracing with this. And so we can see what our like normal traces look like. And then when when we have an issue, we can set up quickly a check that traces their traffic too, and compare and contrast. And it really kind of takes what was a very manual, very uh, intensive investigation process and turns it into like something that's quick and pretty easy.
Nice. Yeah, and as far as I understand, this is one of the, I guess if I can, or if I may, given that we've talked many times, there are like three kinds of checks that you're using in Checkly, right? Like one probably, or one group I would define as the one that checks the connections between your clusters and all your infra, then the customer focused ones, and lately the very ad hoc intermittent ones that help on a schedule catch the sneaky things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so sort of like one other way I think I would bucket them is sort of like general uptime and performance that we are running across all of our clusters, across all the tiers within clusters, across all the services. And then sort of behavioral checks that are saying more sort of a more detailed flow. And then, yeah, these like customer specific ones where if kind of an issue comes up, we can add them. And I think it kind of gets at one of Render's particular challenges to, and particularly working on this part of the infrastructure here, because our routing layer kind of sits in between our users and our users code. There's a lot of complexity in understanding like the flow, and that's kind of where the traces really help.
Yeah, thank you for explaining, because you definitely know how you use it better than I.
No, yeah, definitely three types.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is really cool, because I think I see a lot of customers, at least when I'm doing the product research interviews, doing the first one and the second one, but the intermittent issues catcher is definitely a very cool newbie for what I'm normally seeing. So yeah, thank you for explaining.
Thank you. Yeah, so this kind of ties nicely into what I want to talk about next. So we did kind of mention the requirements you had when you were looking for a solution, but the first one, I think, which we did not mention, I think, so far, was integration with infrastructure as code, which means Terraform in this case.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to ask how the integration went, and it with Checkly as a platform in general, and then with Traces. Was it easy to integrate it with the tools you were already using? How did that go?
Yeah. Yeah, so the Terraform part was very important to us because we also have a Terraform provider. And as I kind of alluded to earlier, we have like many clusters and many different paths, different kind of services we deploy into these clusters, and we want to monitor all of them. And so we can, by using render Terraform and Checkly Terraform, easily stamp out new test services, these kind of known good services, and checks that run against them. And so having as good of a Terraform provider as you all have has been really helpful for that. And then adding the traces was pretty straightforward. We found the kind of the core of this routing layer is in Go, and there's great Go hotel libraries, and the in particular Checkly's docs on integrating these libraries are very good. Like even when we are using the traces, using hotel libraries in other things that aren't going to be traced by Checkly, we still reference the Checkly docs because they make it so easy. It's pretty straightforward. There's a little bit of like, you do have to be thoughtful with kind of snaking the spans and the traces through your code, but that's more of like, it's not hard, it's just a little bit of like, you have to be thoughtful.
Right. Yeah. One thing that I've seen sometimes is that people come and instrument every piece of their code, and suddenly there's just too much information that being able to, yeah, to get to the thing that is actually going to help you is tricky, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, and yes, we're very proud for our dogs, and we even have here in the webinar today somebody, an early beta tester, Igor, that has helped getting the Next.js one up notch as well. So
That's great.
yeah, it's really reassuring, I guess. Thank you.
So the next thing that I actually wanted to talk about was how the solution looked like, but that we kind of covered. So the Terraform integration, and then connection with Grafana and OpenTelemetry through Checkly traces, which kind of results in real-time tracing and better root cause analysis. So if you use a monitoring platform like Checkly to identify when something's wrong, you can only do that. You get an alert when something is wrong, but you still need to go through a lot of data to find out what is it that is wrong. And that can sometimes take up even weeks, right? So you need a tool like Traces to identify, in my particular example, something's wrong with the message queue, and that affects orders, and that you can identify with a trace that pinpoints the exact root cause. To put it simple, without Checkly traces, the world doesn't look that nice. So you get a lot of data, a lot of error messages, and unrelated system noise. And then with Checkly traces, you get, the idea is that you get relevant data, clear insights, and that you resolve issues quickly. And this is how it actually looks in the Checkly app. So I would, Maria, maybe it would be better if I would hand it over to you to explain the difference between these two screenshots.
Yeah, so this is an API check. Of course, Traces works for browser checks. Honestly, all of the checks except TCP ones, because those are still in beta. But yeah, what you can see is the multi-step check on the left that is going in and running those checks against the different endpoints. And then what you can see on the one that is receiving the traces and has the spans is the exact and specific things that happen in our system after that request is made, right? So there is the Redis call in the beginning, and then the different Postgres queries that we're running. So if one of those Postgres queries times out, or I don't know, Redis queued up and is printing a very awful message, as it does sometimes, then you will see it here, and that would help you get to the root of the problem, right? Because the thing is that we're very, very, very good at detecting so that your customers don't notice the issues and you notice and fix them before those. But sometimes the issues are so deep inside your services and applications that you need traces, and that's exactly why we added them, to be able to get to the root of the problem and see exactly what caused it and which piece of your system it was. And yeah, that's what I can say about this. I can talk about it for hours, but this is, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe now would be a good time for a feature demo, if that's possible.
I am afraid that right now my internet provider is having DNS issues with both GitHub and Checkly. I hope that they would be using Checkly traces in Checkly to monitor and avoid this. I will be calling Telefonica and Odos very quickly. But yeah.
Okay, then maybe
I will let you know if it comes back. But yeah, that's ever loading.
yeah, makes sense. Sorry about that. but maybe we can talk about how it works in the background so that people can understand the logic behind a feature.
Yes. So basically what we're doing is that whenever we're hitting someone's application, we're sending with the request, like with the HTTP headers in the request, we're setting the trace parent and the trace state headers. What this means effectively is that we're setting the initial span, what is called the root span in OpenTelemetry, that will be the parent of everyone else. So as it goes through the different services or your application, it will start associating the spans to the parent that we have set. And yeah, that's what then, once you've instrumented your applications and configured them to send things to Checkly, give us the nice view that we were seeing before in the screenshot. Overall, the other thing that you can see in here is that you can also export that initial root span that we generate, which contains more data, right? There is the trace state that says checkly true, but there is also check result data that you can export to Honeycomb or CoreLogix or Grafana, your Tempo instance, so that you can see it together. And honestly, our general recommendation is exactly that you do both things. One will help you very, very easily get to the root of the problem, right? When you're getting an alert either through Grafana or Checkly alerts or, I don't know, Opsgenie or whoever you have configured, you're getting a link to the check result and you click that through and you see everything in it. And the other way around, I would recommend more for what you call preventive maintenance and regular checkups, right? So that you can check against your synthetic monitoring versus the other real usage that you're having. And yeah, I don't know if maybe, and this is putting you on the spot, Ryan, but maybe you can tell us how it is for you to be able to have the traces in there, right? And
Yeah.
how.
Yeah, and we actually do both as well. We have Tempo we're running internally, and so you forward your traces onto us. And yeah, and we use it exactly that way. It's nice to have it in Checkly where when you see a failure, you can just go to it and you don't have to like go to another tool and search. But over time, as we're like we're beginning to trace non-Checkly requests as well, like kind of sampling them. It's nice to compare and contrast because as useful as it is to have the synthetic testing kind of baseline, we're not going to be able to recreate all cases that our customers might run into. So definitely having both is very nice.
Cool. Yeah, I guess I have more questions, but I'll let Sarah continue for a minute, and if not, I can go with questions.
I think you can go because the next thing that I want to talk about is results. And before we talk about results, maybe we can talk more about how they
Yeah, I am not sure how deep within your setup we can get, Brian, because I know that some details are going to be private, as into
Sure.
quantifiable data. But I think it's very interesting because the depth of your infrastructure goes one level deeper than mostly everybody else's sometimes does, right? You're providing infrastructure, so for other customers.
Yeah.
So yeah, could you explain to us a bit like what's your, I guess, your networking, the things that you're
Yeah.
checking and so on?
Yeah, so there's kind of I think at a high level, it's not private or a surprise really. So all of our customers, we provide Cloudflare to them. So everybody's going through Cloudflare, and then they're hitting like a cloud. We run on Google and Amazon, and so there's a load balancer, whatever it is called in that exact cloud. And then there's our layer of kind of reverse proxies that are taking requests in, handling them, and then passing them off to user services that we're running as well. And so each of those stages is somewhere where something can go wrong. And that's kind of like what we we can have a trace that kind of tells you where in that process something happens. And then in particular within the Go reverse proxy, there's a lot of individual, but because it's in the hot path, they're very short generally, but very there's like 5 or 6 steps that have to happen for us to route things to you correctly. And so that's where we have like quite a few like little traces or little spans rather. And there's an interaction that happens between our reverse proxy and your code where we're basically opening a TCP connection to you. And that's a very complicated interaction where a lot of things can happen. And so having traces there has been helpful to see where something is kind of being difficult. And in particular, I think, Maria, we were talking recently about this, and you put this really nicely, I thought, was like, we do and we can emit metrics and logs and things about all these things, but they're not very easy to discover where an issue is. The traces are very nice to be like, this is where the issue is, especially with all of these moving parts. You can see, oh, here's the part that is long. And then if you need to, you can go in and add more metrics and things like that. But that's kind of
To me, honestly, having been in observability for a tiny bit, the biggest difference is that yes, metrics tell you the what, and sometimes you need to know what to metric, right, and what to look into. Well, traces is, and especially the way that we're doing it, right, in which you have a very specific request that you're making or a very specific customer journey that you're testing in your application as a check monitor, and then you get the spans that quickly tell you this is the part of your system where things are smelly and where they did go wrong, right? So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's how we're using it, and that's where it's really shining.
Yeah, I'm very happy to hear that.
So I guess now we can move on to results, right? And then you can add more questions if you have, Maria. So I do have some, actually, before we move to results, maybe, Brian, you can tell us, was there an example when you identified a problem with traces that you wouldn't otherwise, or that it would have taken you much longer if you didn't have the feature?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's like at least 3 in like just recent memory, I think, where it kind of really helped point at an intermittent and rare problem. And like one example of that would be we have to do DNS lookups to like find the user service internally, and we could see, oh, there's some sort of like latency in accessing the DNS service, and so we could find exactly what that issue was much more quickly than we ever would have before. Like it's an investigation that we've done before, and similar things have happened before that took 2 weeks, 3 weeks. This time it was just like, oh, the lookup is taking a long time. That points to the problem, and then you can debug quickly. All the way through to like the most recent thing that we've been kind of working on is there's a step where basically we have a connection pool and we have to pick up connections out of this pool. And sometimes that takes a long time. We're not talking like minutes or something, but a longer time than usual. And
longer than it should, right? Like
Yeah,
you have to find whatever framework it is, and then
Yeah, exactly. And I genuinely, it's like one of these things that traces are and will help us understand this more as we go forward, just because it's like something that is buried in there, and it's hard to pull out otherwise.
Yeah, I also think or believe that it's really good that you can help customers this way, right? Like I think there is a point sometimes, especially if you're in a support conversation in which they're telling you, I don't know, this is taking too long for whatever reason. And then you gotta know if it's something within their code or yours, so to speak. So being
Yes.
able to more accurately say, okay, this is where the issue might be, or taking that complete ownership, or then also helping customers get that visibility, right? And I think you mentioned that sometimes you do tell the customer, right, to say, okay, we're going to be activating more traces on your end so that
Yeah,
we
we
get a
always
fuller
check
picture.
first. Yeah.
Yeah.
And oftentimes it is it's not even that we check first, it's that we need information from them. For instance, a lot of customers, like a lot of times, honestly, like slow requests will happen on like posts and things more often. And so that's often like authenticated. And so we get creds from them, and like Checkly makes it very easy to make these authenticated, complicated requests. Um, and so, yeah, we obviously check with them first. And then, yeah, I think kind of one thing that extends from what you're talking about there is like, because we don't have visibility into user code, um, this is the tool that we have to see. We know generics, like we know like somebody's running a node service, for instance. And so with traces, we can see, oh, it's taking a long time to establish this connection. And then we have an internal checklist of like, oftentimes this means they've configured node this way or that way, and they should do it differently, basically.
Right. Yeah, I guess the most interesting thing for me is that you're providing any kind of, I guess, website or AA development to happen within render. So yes, you do not have control over the code that is running in there. And making sure that you have a platform that can support all of those different use cases, while at the same time be able to help them troubleshoot when they have a problem.
Yeah.
And that is really cool. And then we're also helping the platform being alive for everyone, which is the biggest deal. Yeah.
That's really cool. Thanks for sharing that. Yes, and now the results. I do have, I guess the most important one is reduce time to resolution. And I do have some noted here, but maybe you can tell us like what is the biggest benefit for you for adopting Checkly traces, or what is like the most obvious result, the thing that was most important to you?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. So with the reduced time to resolution, I think it's even, some things are like the previous time would be infinite, and so it's like, infinitely faster. Like we recently caught before it became an issue in production, we were able to catch it in staging with Checkly checks that somebody had accidentally modified a firewall rule. And that if that had made it to prod, it would have been not like a very dangerous thing. And so with Checkly checks constantly monitoring our network connections, and in this case, asserting that we couldn't make a connection that we suddenly could, it was like, it really saved the day, basically. So that, and then we have similar things with, if you push a change to staging and suddenly staging checks start failing, that's great. So reduce time to resolution. But I think to me, and customer trust, like Render's whole business is just customer trust, right? Like if you're a cloud provider, that's the whole thing. And I think
we get you.
yeah.
It's our whole thing as well. Yes.
Yeah. And so I think one of the most difficult customer trust situations is if somebody writes in with an issue and you have to say, I don't know. Checkly, so having the traces, having checks that we can turn on for specific customers, and the traces in particular really cut down on the I don't knows. And makes the getting to the I know phase much faster. Things that used to be 2 weeks, now we can kind of say like, hey, give us an endpoint, give us some creds, let us start calling it, we'll get back to you in a couple days, as opposed to like it used to be like weeks. So customer trust is the really big one, and I think it comes from confidence in ourselves that Checkly provides, basically. With the constant monitoring and the traces, we have a lot more confidence to say, here's what's happening.
Nice. Yeah, I guess one thing that is mentioned here also is that empower support teams. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, this is something we're kind of just getting off the ground now, but the idea is basically, we have I think in my opinion, the best team at Render is our support team. They're very, very good. But at some point they have to escalate to the infrastructure team for these kinds of issues. And as we're kind of going down this path with Checkly more and more, they're going to start writing the checks themselves, basically. So when a request comes in for support, they can get the check set up and then do enough debugging on their side that either they know it's us or likely not. And then the two cases is, one is hopefully they can just like talk to the customer directly and figure it out without escalating. But even when it does need to escalate, we have a bunch of debug info there already, which will help. We find the repro case already.
Yeah, I think to me it's really nice to know and understand how Checkly is expanding to help more teams and be more autonomous, right? Like that autonomy in them being able to resolve and you preserving your time to the escalated cases is also precious. So
yeah.
That's really nice to hear. It's always cool to know how we impact our client, but then it's a bigger reward to find out how we impact our clients' clients.
Yeah.
So that's really nice. Thank you for sharing that. And before we wrap it up, just a few more important information about Checkly, that we detect, communicate, and resolve issues by delivering a clear signal, shifting monitoring left, and then adding monitoring as a part of your software development cycle. So programmable monitors that can stand next to your application code. And then we do this with some key features, let's say, to detect issues. We have browser monitoring, API and heartbeat monitoring, and then we communicate problems with alerts and dashboards. And very soon we're going to have really cool status pages that we're very excited about. And finally, to resolve what we talked about today, we use traces. Any questions? Or maybe Maria, if you have any additional questions for Ryan.
Yeah, I think one thing that we've discussed in the past and we haven't covered is how you're using tags in Checkly and how that's given you somewhat flexibility or identifiers that then you can spread in Grafana, Slack, I don't know. Tell me more.
Yeah, so I think I've kind of mentioned how we have like multiple clusters and then multiple tiers within a cluster. And so we have this kind of like N by M by K, like the huge explosion of checks, basically. And we tag all of them with your kind of like the tags where, I guess, for your Grafana export, which we use, when you tag, like cluster : foo, it ends up as a tag in Grafana. And that's where we take it and we kind of can split it out and see like this tier is having a problem or this cluster is having a problem or something specific like that. So we really like the tags. Yeah, and then which is related to we also are heavy users of private locations, and those also end up with a tag that we can kind of use in our Grafana viewing as well.
Nice. Thank you for explaining. I think some of the coolest things that we have at Checkly is the flexibility to really provide you the monitoring things that you need, but also integrate with whatever your workflow is. So yeah, making sure that you are using the Terraform provider instead of the CLI, which is my favorite. But then there are customers that have Pulumi as a favorite, so that is really nice. Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I don't know if anyone has any questions from the people attending.
I still can't see the chat, sorry.
I
I've
can
been
see it, but there are no questions so far.
I will just stop sharing my screen because I wanted to drop a few links in the chat, including how to get started with traces. And if you're more interested in getting to know the feature or getting some more details, you can schedule a call with Maria. So I am just going to drop these links in the chat. And other than that, I want to thank everyone for joining. I want to thank Brian and Maria both for joining me here today, and also thank you, Brian, for telling us all these cool examples and stories about how you use Checkly. And we are very thrilled that you are seeing the benefits.
Yeah, thank you. I'm always happy to talk to Checkly.
Yeah, same way.